Okay, it's after 7. If everybody can try to find a seat. If we need more seats, there's more chairs back there. Thank you all. What a wonderful turnout for a new possible project and new possible fantastic jobs for our community. I met Chris Paul last year. Every year the Mining Association has a bunch of miners come into the rotunda. They have booths and they try to tell us about their projects. Well, Chris's was the first one I saw, and I never moved on because, wow, this is something going on in Cambridge. So I'm very excited that we have something that possibly could replace what we used to have when we managed the forest. Y'all remember that, when there were mills and logging jobs and paid really good wages? So perhaps we will have that again. First, I'd like to introduce Representative Jason Gallagher. She lives down at Weiser. She's District 9. I guess I should introduce myself too. Everybody probably doesn't know me. I'm Judy Boyle. I'm your representative. I live in Midvale. And somewhere, Gordon Wilkerson is wandering around here. There he is in the middle. He's your county commissioner from up there. So I will turn this over to the CEO, to Chris Paul. And he's Canadian, but don't hold that against him because he's a really nice gentleman.
Thanks, Judy. Thanks, Judy, and thanks everyone for turning out. This is a really great crowd. It's really nice to see this many people show up for our little company. I'm Chris Paul. I'm the CEO of Hercules Silver Corp. Here with me is Chris Longton. He's the VPX of the company. And Chris, maybe you want to flip the slide here to the next slide. So, a large part of the reason we called this town hall and brought everyone here is we wanted to talk about who we are, what the company does, manage expectations a little bit, because there's been a lot of rumors running wild about 300 miners coming to town next year and all sorts of crazy things, and unfortunately that's not the truth. I wish it was that easy, but we're an exploration company. So we're listed on the TSX stock exchange, and what we do, we're in the business of looking for minerals. So a little bit about the background of how we got here and how this all came to be and why there's so much excitement over the Hercules project right now. So, the Hercules, it dates back to the 1800s, and you had some, quite a bit of silver mining happening here in late 1800s and the early 1900s. And then in 1965, an exploration company called Anglo-Beaumark came in and entered the picture, and they, for about 20 years, they drilled 308 drill holes. And they had quite a bit of success. They put together a small historical resource of around roughly 24 million ounces of silver, which sounds like a lot, and it was for those days. But these days, that's considered a relatively small deposit. So what they wanted to do basically is they wanted to put this in a small scale production, and so. They were doing feasibility studies, small feasibility studies in the late 70s and early 80s. But, like a lot of exploration projects, this is a very high risk, high reward business. And, a lot of things have to go right. About 100 different things have to go right for a project to work. And unfortunately for Anglo-Beaumark back then, they just couldn't tick all the boxes. So, the project, it didn't make money. So it never got off the ground, and in the mid 80s, the price of silver crashed, and really it didn't recover for about 20 years until the 2000s. So the project essentially fell by the wayside, and it's really it was orphaned and it was forgotten. So 40 years later, our company is looking for a new project. I've been working in Idaho since about 2019. my background, I'm a geologist, and I come from British Columbia, and I've been doing exploration in British Columbia for a long time. British Columbia is overexplored. There's a lot of places in the world that are overexplored. There's not much easy stuff left to find anymore. All the easy low-hanging fruit at surface has pretty much been found. But I came down here in 2019 and worked here for a couple of years, and I just saw a lot of potential in Idaho. There are a lot of old mines here that people haven't come back and given these things another look. And that's sort of the theme of modern exploration these days, is we like to come back to areas that were mined or heavily explored. But back then they didn't have the technology to look deeper. They couldn't drill that deep, and even if they did drill that deep, they didn't have the technology to mine, underground, that efficiently. So, we looked at the Hercules project. It was introduced to me through someone in my network, a claim staker actually, and I thought, this is a really, really nice project. It didn't work back then. It was too low grade, a little too small, but no one's ever really taken a look at the bigger picture here. So we came in and we picked up the project in 2021. And we basically had a vision to, let's use new technology and let's step back a bit, because all the historical exploration was really just focused in one small area, just around the old 1800s mines. So, let's use modern technology, and let's take a modern systematic approach to the exploration here and see if we can, as scientists, put together the puzzle on exactly what this means. And so for 2 years, in 2021 and 2022, myself and our geologists, we got out in the field and we spent the last 2 summers, hiking around the woods and taking soil samples, and, we mapped the property, we mapped the geology, took a bunch of rock samples, and it was interesting. What we started to see was you had this old silver mine and this old silver resource, but there was a lot more going on outside of that. We were starting to see scale that was several kilometers in length for the silver system. But what was really, really interesting is to the east of where all that silver was showing up. The old timers had missed something very important, and this is something that showed up, when we did this big grid of soil samples, and that was copper. So, in geology we have layers of rocks, and the silver sits in the upper layer. We call it the upper plate. But there's a lower plate underneath the silver, and part of that lower plate gets exposed on the east side of the property, and it was just lighting up with copper. And so we thought, that's really interesting. And so, we brought this specialist geological mapper out, a guy who is very well known. He's an expert on these copper deposits. And he came out and he mapped the deposit for us last year in 2022. And he said, you know what, guys, I'm not seeing it. It doesn't look good enough. I'm not seeing the type of alteration that we need to see for a big copper system. And there's probably a big copper system somewhere, but these rocks here, they're far from it. So the last thing that we ended up doing in 2022, which is last year, is we thought, okay, well, let's try doing something called geophysics, and this is where things get really modern. So we did a survey called IP, and what IP is basically you bring out a big generator and you run wire across the ground and you inject an electrical current through the ground. And then, these scientists, these geophysicists will actually take these electrodes and stick them in the ground. So while the current's running, they'll essentially stick a big ohm meter in the ground, and they can measure how resistive the ground is to an electrical current. So they can find out, where the rock's resistive and where are they conductive. And so we got those results back at the end of last year, and, they were pretty disappointing. So we were looking for silver, right? The copper wasn't, it wasn't looking that good, but we still thought this silver's looking good. Maybe that historical stuff that they drilled goes down deeper and gets bigger. So we ran it over where the silver was, and we got nothing. It just wasn't there. There was no conductivity. There wasn't that much metal in the ground. What we did end up getting, which really surprised us, was below all those 300 historical drill holes, all of a sudden things started lighting up, and we got this big, what we call a chargeability anomaly at depth. So, we thought that's interesting. And we show up this year, and this is our year to drill. So, we put a few very shallow RC holes in last year just to validate some of the historical drill, make sure it was legitimate, and it was. This year we came out, and this was our year to really do the discovery drilling, really test, hey, okay, we know that historical stuff is there. Can we find something bigger? Is there something, more to the picture than meets the eye? So we got to our 5th hole, and on hole number 5, that was our discovery hole. And what we did is we tested that chargeability anomaly at depth. So, we had this big thing below all the historical drilling, and we started up where all the silver was. And, the historical drilling, they would have shut down in this barren rock. So underneath the silver, he's got this barren rock called an andesite, nothing in it. But we kept the drill going, and we drilled down to about 600, 700 feet where this big anomaly was. And as soon as we got into that, all of a sudden, everything changed. We go through this big fault zone, and, lo and behold, 700 feet down, starting 700 feet down, below all, way deeper than the, hold timers would have drilled, there's copper, and very high-grade copper. And so that was the discovery we made, and we put that news out mid-October, and we've generated a heck of a lot of excitement. So that's how we got here. We got a long way to go. Chris, I'm going to hand off the mic here in a bit. Chris will talk a little bit about sort of what the next steps are, what this means, and how much more exploration really needs to be done before we know, do we actually have something here? Could this be a mine? And if it is, what does that look like? And how long is that going to take? So with that said, I'll pass off the mic here to Chris.
Thanks, Chris. So I'm the other Chris, Chris Longton. I just want to talk to everybody a little bit about some of the history of some of the things that have been done here. I think there's folks in this crowd that probably know a lot more about this than I do. So I please humor any mistakes that I do make. But I want to thank the Cambridge Museum. I got to spend a phenomenal day there and going through stacks and stacks of files and records, and they're fantastic. So that is a resource in our community that really needs to be supported and is wonderful. But there's a long history of mining here. In 1864, as Chris alluded, it was in the 1800s, it was Heath and Ruthberg. It was Heath and Ruth were the two fellows that came out here that discovered silver. Heath is where the Fish and Game Office is now, out on 71. So if you've been out there, that's where Heath was. They gelled everything into a mining district in 1875. Between then and 1920, it was going full bore. The Belmont Mine was the big one. George Hurst, father of William Randolph, and if anybody's a fan of the old show Deadwood, he was a big character there. But the Homestake Mine, George Hurst bought the Belmont Mine, and he built a 10-stamp mill that is going to be very important. If anyone here is not familiar with that, it's very important. I'll show you here on the next slide. 1920, Bunker Hill and Sullivan took over. The processing costs were a little expensive for them, so they poked around. As Chris said, in 65, we had the drilling at the Hercules at its own. That's this area up here. And then, from 1984 until 21, it just sat fallow, and nothing was happening much up there. But this is the seal of the great state of Idaho, and it was the only state seal designed by a woman. Her name was Emma Edwards Green. She was a suffragist. She believed in equality, and it shows on the state seal. The male figure and female figure are of equal stature. But the two things that she wanted to stress most of all was the mining and the agriculture, because those are the two things that were the most important at the formation of the state. And the state has lost a lot of that mining, and it is a big part of the history here. Now, inside the center in the shield, you see that building there. That is the 10-stamp mill from the Belmont mine over at Heath, where the Fish and Game Office is now. That, on the state seal, is your heritage, right here in Cambridge, for anyone who did not know that. Let's talk about mining. There are a lot of rumors going around about what's going to happen and where we are, and that there's, you say 300. I've heard up to 800 miners coming in next year, and the whole place is going to erupt with new people. That's not accurate, and I'd like to say that right now. This is the process to get a mine going. We are in step one, exploration. That's us out there, boots on the ground, digging holes, breaking rocks. We're doing geophysics. We're drilling holes. We're just out there doing things, trying to find mineralization, right? This goes for as long as it takes. Realistically, 5 years, I think, is a good amount of time to guess. And then you get into the mine design. That's when all the permitting people, all the environmental people, all the engineers, all of the people that are a heck of a lot smarter than I am, they all get together and they figure out, how are we going to build this thing? How are we going to meet the compliance with all of the regulations? How are we going to do this in a way that makes money, doesn't destroy the environment, and does what mines need to do, gets mineral out of the ground? They also start thinking about step 6, which is the reclamation step, which we'll get into here in a bit. After they design it, you get to construction. They build the mine. That's when you get the big influx of people, right? And that's the construction phase. Now, we're here. I'm going to keep stressing this. We're here. The chances of a mine going from here to here are very slim, all right? Worldwide. We're here. In the construction phase, lots of people come in. They usually get put up in a camp someplace. They'll usually get some land and put up a camp. In my experience, working in different mines as they're being built. After the construction phase, that can take a couple of years. You get into production. That's determined by the mineralization in the ground, how long that lasts, right? That can be 4 years, 10 years, 20 years. How long has Bingham been going? 75? I don't know. It depends on how much mineralization is in the ground and if they can get it out cost effectively. Then they have a closure. At some point, mines close, and they have to have this plan. And they've got to phase people out, and they've got to break down buildings and tear down infrastructure. And the last step is reclamation. Now, when they're at this stage and they're designing the mine, they've got to be thinking about that reclamation stage. That's when they go into construction, they have to bond for reclamation. There's a big misconception that mining companies come in and they mine until they run out of money, and then they go bankrupt, and then they just leave a big hole in the ground, and it's awful. And it was like that 50 years ago, 75 years ago. Now we have to bond for it. So a mining company has to come in, and they've got to put money aside for reclamation that they can never touch, all right? And that's there. So we do very small scale reclamation. When we put a drill hole in the ground, we go back, we recontour it, we seed it over, and hopefully within a couple of years the seeds take, and you never even know there was a hole in the ground there. But from here, where we are, I don't know if I stressed that enough. We're here. Step 1, we're here. To here, worldwide takes over 15 years. In the States, on average, it takes 13 years to get through the permitting phase. From here. Again, where we are now. I like to say we have just made the first step in a 13-year journey, all right? And that's where we are. So to get what goes into that 13 years is a lot of stuff. It's a thing called NEPA. I'm not sure if people are familiar with NEPA. It is the National Environmental Policy Act. It is an umbrella act. This covers everything. These are two different projects. This is Perpetua, which a lot of people here may know and be familiar with. This is a road project that from Arkansas or Mississippi or something like that still had to apply for NEPA. It covers everything. Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, migratory birds, if there's fish in the water, if there's a species at risk, if there's some kind of endangered buckwheat that you can't have dust get near. I've seen it before. There's all sorts of things. This is where they assess for that. This is where they test for that. This is the process. It's not a single thing. It's a process. And there's teams of people that come in and they do work, and you have archaeologists and biologists, and you've got to do baseline studies, and you do those early on in the process to see what your water quality is like there early on, and then as years go by, you keep testing it regularly before you even get into the construction phase to see if there's been any impacts or changes in the time you've been there. All of this has to get done. This is the 13 years. All of this is that 13 years, all right? Now, some people think that's way too fast. Some people think that's way too slow. I'll say this. I'm glad that we have good environmental regulations in America because we protect our waterways, we protect our lands as much as we can, and if we were doing this in other places, it wouldn't be the same. This is our critical minerals list. The United States Geological Survey has come up with this list. I'm not going to go through all of this. I'm sure if anyone wants to read it, you can find it online. But I've highlighted three things here: antimony, manganese, and zinc. Those are three minerals that we have in high abundance that are on this list. What this list is when they say critical minerals, it is critical to our national security. These are all minerals that we get largely from overseas, from countries that may or may not be friendly to us, and that may or may not be friendly to us in the future. China is the biggest miner of most of these things. We are currently beholden to the Chinese for, and I'm not going to speak ill of them, but we're currently beholden to another country for much of our critical national security infrastructure. And the things that are on this list, when these are on a project, they are of higher interest to our government, which is good. This is the other critical minerals list. This is the Department of Energy. So the one difference on this list is copper. Copper isn't on the critical minerals list for the USGS, but it is for the Department of Energy in order for us to meet some of the energy goals that have been set by various governments, administrations that we've had. We have to get this copper. I'll be honest with you, I don't care if my power comes out of a nuclear plant or a windmill or a solar panel or wherever, as long as my lights turn on. But to get that power from that plant to my house, I have to have copper. We have to have copper wire. It's the most recycled metal in the world, and we're facing massive shortfalls of it in the next, within the next 15 years, I think there's. So, just very quickly, silver is what we're sitting on up at the very top. It's pretty, it makes jewelry. My wedding ring is made out of silver. I love it. I think it's terrific. Gold, almost all of gold goes to jewelry. Silver, over half of the silver that gets mined goes into industrial uses. Every solar panel, I've seen solar panels out on the highway that people have out in front of their house. Every one of them's got an ounce of silver in it. Every medical device that we've got medical devices, we have our space program is full of silver. Our cell phones have silver in them. It's one of the most conductive metals in the world, and it is highly, highly important. And copper is king. So if you like indoor plumbing and electricity, God, you gotta like copper. I love it. And it makes our rocks pretty. So if you see the rocks back there, I think they're pretty. There's some purple in them, and the copper sulfides are pretty good looking. But, we're facing shortfalls worldwide. We cannot get mines built fast enough in the world to get enough copper out of the ground to satisfy the needs. The population of the world keeps going up, and people keep needing infrastructure. And this is one of the things we have to have. So the work that we've done, I've heard that we keep getting called miners. We're not. We're explorers. We're explorationists. But if you look at the world in terms of ranchers, loggers, and miners, we are closer with the miners, for sure. But what have we done? We did soil sampling. It was people with shovels going out, digging a hole a couple of feet down, taking a small sample, filling the hole back in. We did the geophysics. One of the things, too, with geophysics lines that we ran, it's a high-power line. It runs for, what do you say, about 3 seconds? I think it is, at a time, 3 to 5 seconds, something like that. Most of the time is spent setting up the lines. They've got to walk them out. Then they test it, and then they run a charge. So if anyone saw any of the high voltage signs, or there's a project up ahead that's got high voltage or something like that, that's what it was. It's to warn people. I'll tell you right now, those lines got tripped up and busted by a lot of cattle. They got chewed on by a bunch of rabbits. I think all sorts of other things have gotten into it. We did not have a pile of corpses laying around those power lines. So it's just a wire. It's got insulation on it. But when we charge the ground, we can get information out of it. We also did a magnetic survey where we flew a drone over, and it can tell us if the ground's got magnetism in it or not. And we did mapping, field mapping. This is not the most invasive stuff in the world. We had people out there breaking rocks with a hammer and digging with a shovel and writing down in a notebook what they've seen. And if you don't see us out there doing it, and you hear there's a bunch of miners in town, I know a lot of people, and clearly not everyone here, but there's a lot of people that picture the Discovery Channel with the guys with the gold pans and they got a D8 up there and they're just tearing up a creek. This is what we're doing. We're breaking rocks with hammers and writing about them and trying to come up with maps. We did drill, and people have an image of what drilling is. This is the size drill hole that we put in the ground. People often, and I'm not saying everybody, but often people think this is what a drill is, and that is what a drill is. That's what an oil drill is. That thing's huge. That's a city. That's a staircase. That's the size of that train. These things are huge. These are monstrous things. That's not what we do. This is what we do. You could fit, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 of them in this room probably. They're small things. They're track-mounted rigs. A couple of people work on them. We try to keep the footprint as small as we possibly can. It makes it easier for us to do the reclamation afterwards, because whether we find anything or not, we have to reclaim it. If people are concerned about holes in the ground that we're poking, we drill a hole, we fill it full of grout all the way up to within 20 feet of the top, and then we cement the top of it. We stick a little metal hook in the top so we can find it with a metal detector, and then we cover the whole thing up with dirt and seeds again. So that's that. This is just showing you where the drilling was. I won't get into it too much, but the big news that we put out, we had 600 feet at 0.84% copper, which, if you're familiar with the copper mining, that's really terrific grade. And we had a smaller zone, almost 150 feet at almost 2% copper, which was really exciting. We got really excited about it, and a lot of other people did too, apparently. So this is what we've done, just so you know what we've been up to. We drilled 26 holes this year. It was about 20,000 feet. We did another IP survey to follow up on the small one we did the previous year. We did this magnetometry survey. We cut a bunch of thin sections so we can do science. We've worked on our permitting. We haven't talked about that too much, but the regulators have been good partners to work with. They're holding us accountable to the things that we need to do, and they're working with us. And that has been fantastic. We purchased the mineral property down south of here a little, which is great. Then looking ahead, next year we're going to basically do the same thing we did this year. We're going to maybe expand from 6,000 meters like we did this year to maybe to 10,000. We might have another drill, one more drill than we had last year. We're going to do some more age dating, going to keep working on that permitting. We're going to do some more soil samples, just digging with a shovel. And we're going to do sampling and mapping at mineral properly. And I mean, that's it. So I'm ending this here, and I'm hoping that a lot of people are saying, oh, you didn't address our needs in the community. Because there's a lot of stuff in the community that we're really worried about. But it isn't for us to stand up here and tell you what's going to happen to your community or how you're going to be doing things in your community or what we are going to do to your community. We're here to talk with you about it, and this is where we do the Q&A. This is where we want to hear from you, hear what your concerns are, and listen, and we can give answers. I'll be up front. A lot of the answers might be, I don't know. But, at least be honest. So that's all I've got. You can take down this information too if you want to get a hold of us at any point. I've also got some business cards around, I'm sure, somewhere. If anybody wants some, I've got some in my coat. And yeah, we'll open the floor up to questions if anybody has some. Yes, hi.
Well, when you get this going, will it limit the public's access? Because we're Idaho, you got people everywhere. So are you going to deny or limit the access to the ground? Because 10,000 acres, that's a lot of ground.
So we aren't limiting anybody's access to anything at the moment. If this becomes a mine, there's going to be a big hole in the ground there, so that's going to impede people's access. Right now, I think the best thing to say is we're working with the regulators. If you've got access to fish and game land now, that shouldn't change while we're out there. If you got access to Forest Service land now, that shouldn't change while we're out there. We do have drilling going on, so if you're there while we're drilling, there's some noise and stuff. But yeah, I don't think that's gonna.
So, we drill when the snow's melted. We can't really get in there when there's snow. So about May, sort of mid-May till mid-November, kind of depending on the season. But there's no reason you can't go in there because really, like all we're doing now is drilling and doing other small stuff. I know we had lots of hikers coming by and walking by the drill and checking it out and everything else. So absolutely not. Obviously we're hoping, we want more than anything for this thing to work, but the next steps are we have to find an ore body. The definition of ore is, you start off with what's called a resource. So right now we've got one drill hole. If we can prove this thing out along, maybe a mile or 2 miles, and it's got a certain width, a certain length, a certain depth, you calculate a volume, you've got a tonnage, you've got a resource. But that's not necessarily economic. You got about 100 things that boxes you got to tick to make it economic. So if feasibility studies and multiple feasibility studies say, hey, yeah, this works, this is economic, we can build a mine, which is obviously a long time in the future. Access may be a different story then, but obviously that's a long way away and still a huge gamble from here. But I think most likely, given the depth, I'm assuming a big question people are going to want to know. Chris mentioned open pit. Is it open pit or underground? Well, way too early to know for sure. But if I was a betting man, based on the fact that we hit this thing really deep down, there's a lot of material on top that you're going to have to remove. So I would guess that if anything, if this does work, it's most likely going to be an underground. So probably a lot less footprint than you'd imagine. Another thing that, I'm just going to go ahead and start answering because you mentioned, I think, acreage and size. And I know people have been wondering about, how big is this? How much disturbance? So, the way exploration works is we're looking for a needle in a haystack at the end of the day. Ore bodies are really small relative to the area you're searching. So for that reason, we need a big haystack to look in. And so what we do is we stake claims. So, if I were to go and stake 100 claims tomorrow, I pay a bunch of fees to the BLM. And those, basically what I'm doing is I'm paying for the right to do exploration. And no one else has claim to those minerals. Only I have claim to those minerals. Now that's going to be good until September 1st, at which time I have to decide, do I want to pay the fees again and keep it going, or do I want to just forget about it and drop the claims? So I think right now, we've staked a whole bunch more claims. And I think total, we were at 4,500 acres. I think now we've got claims covering 8,000 acres. The disturbance is going to be less than 1 acre, right? Because that's just, the area which we want to say, okay, here's everywhere we need to look. But the reality is we're only going to maybe end up building drill pads on, less than 1 acre, maybe a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe up to like 5 acres in the next while. I don't know. But it's going to be relatively small.
So everybody here may not know, where exactly are you located?
Yeah, that's a good question. Do we have a map of exactly where? So I'm sure most people know where the Brownlee Summit is. So if you're going down 71 and you go past the Brownlee Summit, and then there's a turnoff to the right for the the Brownlee campground. Keep going just a little bit past there, and you've got the Camp Creek Road and you've got the Grave Creek Road. So we're up that way.
So it's on Cecil Andrews?
It's on Cecil D. Andrews, correct.
How many rigs will you be using next year? Bill?
So we had 3 this year. We're going to have, so there's 2 types of rigs. You got coring and you got what's called RC. RC is cheaper, but you don't get the nice core that geologists can get a lot of information out of. So we're going to have another 3 core rigs next year, but we're probably going to add 1 RC rig.
So you're talking about like 4?
4 rigs total.
And how many men does it take to operate?
So each rig has 3 people on each shift. So you're talking about 6 drillers per rig. So we'd be looking at about 24 if we had 4 rigs. We may do 3. It's going to be 3 or 4. Yeah.
Are you employee in-house, or are you looking for employees locally? And if you are, what's qualifications to work?
So we definitely, it's in our best interest to hire locally, obviously, for community relations, but also we don't have to house people. We don't have to, pay for their travel down here, coordinate logistics. It's just a lot easier if we have local people, and there's, just good local. I mean, you can bring people down from, cities and stuff like that, but, you're never going to find a better worker than someone that grew up on a ranch. What you get around here. So, we had, how many people locally, you think? Yeah, here, I'll pass it on.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to. We hired as many people as we could. One of the problems is we're temporary right now. So our hiring season for what we do is really the, kind of May to October. And the work that we need for us, which absolutely we want to get people, local people, it's working in the core shack as geotechs and core cutters, and we may need somebody to do some soil sampling or something like that type of thing. So, we're going to be looking for a few people next year. As far as down the road, when an actual mining company comes in, if this thing goes, let's say we take that 13 years of those steps, then it's in their best interest to hire locally as much as possible, because it's ridiculously expensive to bring in an entire workforce from outside. And those jobs are every type of job you can imagine. And when you ask what the qualifications are, you don't need any qualifications to drive a haul truck, right? And if you're a plumber or electrician or mechanic or a machinist or a welder or anything else. There's all those jobs. There's surveyors for the people that like being outside, and then people that have that get the technical education that are engineers and geologists. There's lots of those as well. And yeah, it's in everyone's best interest to hire locally. What are the qualifications for us? And being willing to work and showing up on time and being willing to learn. I don't expect anybody to know how to do the job that we do because nobody's been exposed to it. So as long as you're willing to learn, yeah.
We're happy to train.
Yeah.
We're happy to train.
Happy to train, and we want you on the team.
Train someone and bring someone else in.
Yeah. And you've had your hand up a couple of times. I've seen you. Thank you so much for your patience.
Hypothetically, if you get to the construction phase, how many people are you talking about coming in?
I'm not even going to wager a guess because
On average,
it depends. I've seen it where it's 200 or 300. I've seen it where it's 800, and it's just through the construction phase. So that number sounds huge and kind of scary a lot of times. It isn't, and it doesn't have to be. A lot of that is going to be trying to hire as locally as possible. A lot of times they'll hire a contractor who will go into the local area and hire teams of 10 or 12 people locally. A lot of the technical people have to be brought in from outside. Yeah.
And then from a transportation aspect, obviously we live on a 2-lane highway that's already a mess. And obviously that's a recreational place that you're going to. You're going to be trucking in and out. Like what would that, how do you guys plan for that, move forward for that in conjunction with the state?
Yeah, so that is, I'm going to take us back. That is here, right? And I can't answer because it's looking into a crystal ball, and any answer that I give you is just, it's not true. How do you handle that? Well, when all the people come in to do the construction, oftentimes they'll put them in a camp as close to site as possible, right? In the experience that I've had at a couple of mines. I don't know. And that's what has to be done in the planning stage. And that's to be determined. Yeah, hi.
Does your company handle the next phase, or are you passing off to another company for mine design?
We're explorers. So the best case scenario is that we find something and someone with the skills to mine would come in and take over at that phase. Other questions? Yeah, hi.
Are there water rights attached to them 8,000 acres of claims you have?
Well, let you talk to about water rights a little.
No. Pretty much a one-word answer, no, we don't have any water rights.
So when Barrick bought or threw some cash at you, does that happen often, or is that something that was like out of left field and you felt like they validated what you found to get right?
Great question. It's my favorite question so far. No, it does not happen very often. It might actually be the very first time Barrick Gold Corp has ever made an investment in a junior. So I think that says two things. One is, that things are changing. I mean, the way that, as Chris explained, we're an exploration company. So we're geologists, and we're not trying to dodge certain mining questions. We just truly don't know. And that's such a long time in the future. And, we have to have so much success in order for, a company to come and take us out. But, Barrick, and pretty much any other major mining company, the reality is like I said earlier, we're running out of ore. These companies, copper is not a renewable resource. You can't grow it. And so, it's getting very competitive because there's just not much left. And, the only places where, large copper deposits or good grade copper deposits or copper deposits that work are in countries that are not the greatest politically. So to find something here at home in Idaho, in a really great political jurisdiction, is huge. So, when we made the discovery, we put out the news, and there was a lot of excitement, and there was a lot of competition. I mean, Barrick was not the only company that was interested. We had a company called Rio Tinto, Kennecott, First Quantum, Tech, BHP, Newmont. All these companies, I think, saw the significance of, what this could mean, and knowing that they're running out of ore, knowing that they need to buy a company to replace their reserves, it got very competitive, and, we saw something that's never happened before, which is Mark Bristow, the CEO of Barrick, saying, we're going to take a stake in this small junior company that was, 14 months ago, we were trading at 5 cents, and they made the investment at $1.10, so pretty cool stuff. Yes, sir.
In your exploration phase, does a lot of it depend, a lot of the mine design actually depend a lot on what your exploration phase actually shows as far as your drill holes and all that, as far as how much overburden or how much depth or whatever you're going to have? So is Barrick actually controlling a lot of more of your exploration, or is it just your own idea?
So Barrick is, part of the deal that I made with Barrick. So, there was a number of different major companies that all were offering financing money to us, and they were all in roughly the same terms. So Barrick said, well, look, what can we do to sweeten the offer? And I said, what would be really great? Barrick, you've got experts. You got expert geophysicists, expert geochemists, structural people, throw in some technical support. And so that was actually part of the deal that we made with them, is they're going to be helping us out. And so over the winter, we've shared all of our data with them. They have access to everything. And so we're leveraging their experts to interpret everything that we've drilled, down to a fine detail. And they're going to be helping build a 3D model on how it all is starting to shape up and how it's starting to look. I'm sure, without a doubt, they're going to be suggesting, you may want to test this target here, you may want to test this target here, because, as great as one drill hole is at this stage, one drill hole obviously doesn't make a mine. So the next step for the company is we got to figure out which way is this thing trending, right? Is it going north, east, down, up? So that's going to be a challenge for next season. And, we've obviously got a lot of ideas of our own on what's happening, but, having Barrick's support on that is going to be really critical to keeping this thing going and finding where it actually continues so we can grow it. And what the geometry of the deposit, let's call it, ends up looking like is largely going to dictate how it's mined. So depending on how much, if we got 600 feet, 1,000 feet of overburden, I'm not an engineer, but I'd say it's a pretty safe bet that would be an underground operation. That's a lot of overburden to remove for an open pit. So.
There's a lady over here that had a question. Hi.
I just have a quick question, and I know you're just in the exploration stage, and you keep mentioning that you're not. What I want to know is how long you think you're going to be in that phase.
So that's the $1 million question.
Well, I know you don't know exactly, but how do you feel about this since you've done this before?
Yeah. Well, I've never found anything before. That's for sure. No.
Not like this.
Not that good. We've kind of been joking a bit that, I hope I'm not that good, right? Because if I'm so good that all I've done is I've just drilled the best part of it first and then, there's nothing else, then that's not a good situation.
Lasting 2 more years or 3 more years? Or?
I put a gun to my head, I have to answer, I'm going to say 5 years.
5 more years?
Yeah. Yeah, probably more.
Okay.
Probably more. Now, whether that's us, if I'm being transparent, the goal of Hercules Silver, the goal for us as a company is to get bought out by Barrick or Rio or one of the bigger companies. That's how we make money, because obviously exploration companies don't make money. We don't generate revenue. The only way our shareholders win is if a larger company comes in and buys all our shares and says, okay, you guys have done enough to give us confidence that, we're gonna take it from here. And, that's when the resource definition starts. So once we've said, okay, it's this long, roughly looks like it's this long, this wide, this deep, that might take about 5 years, and then, they're gonna be doing, here, Chris has got some more.
Yeah, another thing too, though, is a lot of the permitting work is done concurrently with the exploration, right? So if we get a few more holes and we start feeling pretty confident that the ore body actually is here, then you start getting some overlap where you get the permitting crews out and they're doing the environmental studies and the baseline studies and all of that. So, it isn't exactly a hard line here. It is before you actually get to the mine design phase. But that 13-year NEPA process that I was talking about, or the average 13 years, that NEPA process would start, in theory, before we're like completely done with the exploration.
So you're saying that you are exploring, that at some point Barrick could come in or somebody and take over the exploration? You'll be out of it.
Another company could.
Any company?
Any other company could, yeah. I see your hands up. I'm going to get you in 1 second. The lady that asked about the roads, I felt that I didn't give a very satisfactory answer, and it's because I don't have one, but it's a valid question, and I do appreciate that you brought it up. I'm not in a position to answer it. We don't know. But I've brought a notebook, actually, to write down things that people bring up that are concerns, and people feel free to come up to me after we're done talking to and talk to me one-on-one about this stuff, so I can write it down and just so we can be aware of it, because we don't know all the concerns in the area, and that clearly is that's a very valid one. So thank you for bringing that up. Sorry, you had a question over here.
I just wondered who's doing the permitting? Are you this kind of concurrently going on? Is that you guys or is that someone else?
We have a contract group that we work with that's what they do for a living, and they work on that. So we just brought a fella in who's based out of Boise, and he's doing a lot of that for us, helping us. But we work with the group in Reno as well. Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
So somebody mentioned water rights. What are the water impacts? Maybe there aren't any yet now, but when the mine gets going, what are the possible impacts to water, and how much does it take to do your things? Are you going to be drawing from the water table?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and that's what those studies are designed to determine, right? Right now, we tap a very small amount of water. We will recycle our water at site, right? So we have tanks at the site that we pump intermittently to, and then we're able to use a centrifuge to separate like the crud from the water after we've drilled with it to keep reusing the water. So we don't use very much currently. To actually mine, mining can be very water intensive, and that's what the studies are for. And that's what teams of experts have to come in and determine. I feel terribly when I don't have a better answer. I just don't want to make something up and lie to you.
How about byproducts, arsenic, whatever, the chemicals that may end up there?
Yeah, no, that's great. Arsenic is a huge concern to a lot of people. We aren't worried about arsenic because we haven't had any yet. We keep testing for it. We keep assaying for it. We keep not finding it. It's one of the things that makes our copper so appealing to a lot of larger companies is that arsenic is not one of the things that we have to be concerned about here. If it was a gold project, a lot of times they have a lot of arsenic. Not always, but a lot of times. And a lot of other copper projects can, but it's just not part of our mineralization. Just
just sort of one more thing about that arsenic is, we don't want it obviously for environmental reasons, but there's also huge economic implications for having arsenic in your ore. So let's say this was an ore body and it was mined and you're producing a copper concentrate. Well, if you have any significant amounts of arsenic in that, and basically you're producing a concentrate and you're shipping that out to a smelter somewhere, maybe in Japan or who knows, there's a massive penalty for arsenic because they have to essentially remove that. It's a real pain. And so when the various major companies were coming down and evaluating, is this thing worth an investment, that was one of the key things that they looked at. Was, is there arsenic? Is this dirty ore or is this clean ore? And, one of the really fortunate things we have out here is really clean mineralization. So, yeah, that's one of the good things we got going for us. Oh, sorry.
We have a lot of arsenic in lower elevations. Is that because you guys have higher elevation, you think, or does that have anything to do with arsenic mode?
No, I mean, arsenic it usually occurs with a mineral called arsenopyrite. So basically regular pyrite with an arsenic atom bonded to it. And, you just get that in different geologies. Like I'm from BC. I know in Vancouver and parts of the lower mainland, groundwater is a huge arsenic problem because they have a lot of arsenopyrite in a black shale unit. So there's just certain geological units, usually often they're black shales for whatever reason. I think it has to do with the amount of carbon in those black shales. I think that carbon likes to absorb any arsenic that's sort of traveling by and grabs onto it, but it won't be elevation related. It'll be something to do with the local geology down lower. Yes, sir.
Yeah, following up a little bit on this question here. While you're drilling, let's give you a hypothetical and then you intersect a groundwater vein or table. Is it a consideration that you would put in there to work proactively with the Department of Environmental Quality to maybe use that as a groundwater monitoring well and put yourself ahead in that area?
Yeah, I'll pass that on. Yeah, so I've been mired in our permitting with our hydrology questionnaires and things. At the moment, we're not equipped for that, to do that right now. That's something, though, that as we start developing, and if it makes sense that it looks like this may start going, we're going to. What we're doing right now is noting where it is, right? And we note it, and then we have to work with, when we work with the Forest Service, and they asked us on our hydrology questionnaire about known water in the area that we've intersected, I'm able to provide information about the depth and the gallons per minute at those locations. It's tricky because a lot of our units aren't good aquifers. And so the water that we intersect is actually coming up around faults. And it's more telling for us of a structural, there's some fault and the rock's all ground up and it makes a good channel for the fluid to go. But it isn't necessarily where the static water table is necessarily in 50 feet away, right? Because once we get out of the fault, it's completely different. But yeah, we're collecting the data as best we can currently, and then as they get closer, that's when we start overlapping all of the different things going on, and that's when they start doing piezometer installs, and that's when they start checking, how the water table is doing. But we aren't equipped to do that right now.
So, and then they had trucks running from the old mercury mine out there, hauling in there too.
Well, it's great that if it's built to hold that. Again, and it's just something I just don't have, I don't have the direct experience with, so thank you. Somebody over here? Hi, yeah.
What's gonna be the communication for the residents if you
Yeah, so hopefully there's going to be a lot of communication with the with the community, and that's why I'll go back to the last slide. First off, the most direct way to do it is just ask us, right? Hopefully we can do these town hall meetings again, and hopefully we have communication with our representatives and their offices and with the mayor and the mayor's office, and we can get information out to people in that way. As we're doing other things, we're a publicly traded company. So if you look on our website, we have news releases about the different types of work that we're doing, and we put them out. The different environmental studies take place down the road.
Another thing you can do if you want to track progress is if you go to the website, there's a little sign-up form, and you just put your email, and we'll send you every single news release that comes out, so you can kind of keep progress.
Chris, we'll send them all an email from the emails that you guys gave us.
Oh, that's
So
fantastic.
provide all the information tomorrow. We'll have something to
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, just to clarify, I get your news releases, but I was surprised to hear about this meeting because I didn't get a news release or an email from you guys about this meeting, so maybe we could have that communication.
We will start now. Like those emails you provided will be a great way for us to contact everyone locally.
Yeah, definitely. There'll be a news release about it next time. Sounds like you want the mic.
Yeah, we put this one together a little catch as catch can, and we realized that there were a lot of questions in the community, and we kind of scrambled, and I think that just got lost in the shuffle. But yeah, we'll be a bit more prepared next time. So thank you for bringing that up.
I was curious, do you have a kind of a breakdown, a total acreage that you're looking at right now that's federal land, state land, and private?
Yeah. Do you have a good sense of that? I think it's a third.
Yeah, I definitely don't have exact numbers, but at last count, just snipping around the boundary, I think I counted, claim-wise, we're about 8,500 acres. I'd say about 1/3 of that is state and probably 2/3 Forest Service.
No private?
We have one 20-acre private claim, patented mining claim, yeah.
Thanks.
Wish we had more.
So, depending on your findings with exploration, especially over the future years, do you think it could spur more exploration in the area, say Cuban bears?
Yeah, actually that reminds me of a pretty key point we should probably be talking about here, and that's the copper rush that's going on right now as we speak. So the type of copper deposit that we found is a unique type of deposit called a copper porphyry. And copper porphyries are, very sought after because they tend to be on the larger side. The other really unique thing about porphyries is they almost always occur in clusters. So where there's one, there's probably going to be another one, 2 or 3. So when we announced the news, it wasn't just Barrick coming in and making the investment. There's at least one other major mining company. They might even be here in the audience for all I know. And they've got a big team of stakers down here. I mean, technically they're competitive to us. But, I go by the Frontier Motel. I like to drive by and snoop in and see how many trucks are there with Nevada plates. And I think I counted 7. And they got a pretty big shop out back where they're making claim posts right now. So that's pretty interesting. That tells me they're probably staking a lot of claims. They got a lot of money. And what they're doing at the end of the day is they're just following the trend. So, the geological belt that Hercules is in runs northeast up towards Hornet Creek, and it runs southwest, through Mineral and all the way down across the river and into Huntington, Oregon. So you got a big belt in there. And I know Barrick's around, and I know Rio Tinto's around, and I know there's a few small juniors, and they're probably going to be here for a little while. I've even heard there's a helicopter flying around trying to beat everyone else. So everyone's just trying to get, just get ground in the district. So Cooperum's a really interesting area. I've been looking at that one. I don't know, that's a funny one. I don't know if it's exactly on the trend. It's a little off the trend, but there's a lot of copper there. But yeah, there's a lot of silver back in the day. I've looked into it. The geology's a little different, sort of a different type of deposit, more like we call VMS rather than porphyry, but I'm sure there's going to be exploration happening there, no doubt. Yeah.
Anyone else? Yes.
In the back.
Yeah. You mentioned mineral. Are you going to do drilling out there next year as well?
No. Yeah, we'll probably do a little bit of grassroots work, for sure. To be perfectly honest, the reason I picked that thing up was almost like, it was like a real estate speculation. I go, okay, we've made a discovery. There's going to be a staking rush. Let's go pick that thing up before everyone else does, and sort of just shoot first, ask questions later. So we don't even really know what the plans are there, but probably do like some soil sampling and mapping and start to figure it out a little bit. Yeah. I saw someone in the back there before.
So on the Cutting Mountain area, the foresters planted a lot of white bark pine. Did they know you were coming, or there's a lot on grazing loggers?
They've warned us about the white bark pine.
What's that?
You've been talking to the forest.
They've told us about the white bark pine, and we'll make sure that everybody has good identification, and so we won't touch them. So, wait.
I'm not worried about it. It's frizzy there, so it's cold, but we won't have any of those.
Anyone else? Thank you all so much for coming out tonight and taking the time on an evening to come out and talk with us and listen to us. We'll stay around here too if some folks want to come up and talk to us individually. I know not everybody wants to jump up in front of a whole crowd and ask stuff, so if you want to talk to us one-on-one, we'll be here for a bit. And thank you again. This has been wonderful.
Thanks, everyone.